From Starship No. 4's fiery crash and burn to SN7's weirdly necessary but intentional failure, here is a list of SpaceX missions that did not go according to plan. Starting off with SN1, the SpaceX prototype that went kaboom totally fell apart during a pressure test in Texas. The middle of the thing buckled and shot up in the air before crashing down to the ground. Yikes. But get this, Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, didn't even seem that bothered by it. In fact, he was already thinking ahead to SN2 and how to make it stronger. He even tweeted about it saying, "It's fine, we'll just buff it out." What a boss, right? I mean, can you imagine the pressure of trying to send rockets into space? I'd probably be freaking out if my prototype exploded like that, but Elon was just like, no big deal. And when the big man said it wasn't a big deal, he meant it. Because soon after the SN1, SpaceX had another whoopsie with their Starship SN3 prototype. During a cryogenic pressure test on April 2nd, 2020, the tank of SN3 collapsed. Ouch. The whole point of the test was to see if SN3 could handle the high pressure of super cold fuel before launch. But it looks like something went wrong, and Elon Musk even tweeted that it might have been a test configuration mistake. He also mentioned that some valves leaked at cryotemp, and they're working on fixing it for the next round of testing. It's gotta be tough when your rocket prototype keeps blowing up, but you've gotta hand it to Elon and the SpaceX team for their persistence. And while a pressure test fail wasn't that concerning, the next mishap will probably shock you even more. So the Space Exploration Company had a fiery mishap with their Starship SN4 prototype. On May 29, 2020, the thing blew up just a minute after a rocket engine test. Talk about bad luck. At first, nobody knew exactly what caused the explosion, but Elon Musk, being the ever-optimistic guy he is, said that the company is learning from each test and moving forward. I guess you gotta keep a positive attitude when your rockets keep going boom. Interestingly, the Starship SN4 was actually the most tested and longest-lived prototype at the time. It survived 5 static fire engine tests before it finally met its explosive demise. Hey, at least they made some progress, right? Anyway, after the explosion of Starship SN4, SpaceX didn't give up. They went on to develop the SN5 and SN6 prototypes before moving on to SN7, which was actually intentionally pushed to failure. Yep, you heard that right. During a pressure test on June 23, 2020, the Starship SN7 prototype tank ruptured as planned. The previous week, the tank had already undergone a pressure test that resulted in a leak, but this time they intentionally pushed it to the point of failure to see what would happen. And boy, did it make for a showy explosion. Despite the intentional failure, according to the Tesla owner, the first test of the SN7 tank that had leaked but not exploded was actually a promising sign for the Starship program's development. Of course, that wasn't the only explosion that made rounds everywhere. The SN8 met a similar fate. So this prototype from SpaceX made quite the entrance on December 9, 2020. It successfully hit several milestones during its flight, but unfortunately failed to stick the landing and went up in flames. The prototype launched using 3 Raptor engines and made it to an altitude of around 7.8 miles, but then before shutting down its engines and doing a belly flop glide back to the launch pad, it then fired its engines again for an attempt at an upright landing. But it was going too fast due to low fuel tank header pressure than expected, which ultimately resulted in its explosion. Despite the explosive ending, Mr. Oliver, the optimist, seemed pleased with the progress. He even took to Twitter to share his thoughts, saying, "SN8 did great," and calling the controlled descent epic. Hey, even reaching apogee would have been impressive. So the fact that they got as far as they did is definitely a step in the right direction. And the SN9 proved just that. The Starship managed to one-up its predecessor SN8 by climbing even higher before meeting a fiery end. On February 2, 2021, it reached an altitude of about 6.2 miles and did a horizontal flip to simulate re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Unfortunately, the landing didn't go as planned. And the rocket hit the landing site too hard after 6.5 minutes of flight, resulting in another explosion. But despite the mishap, SpaceX's principal integration engineer, John Insprucker, was optimistic. During the launch webcast, they mentioned that they still need to work on the landing, but they got a lot of good data. They were happy that they were able to demonstrate control of the vehicle during subsonic re-entry, and it seems like they learned a lot from the experience too. Because after that, we got a Starship that hit all the milestones, yet still managed to fail. Yes, that's possible. The Starship SN10 from SpaceX managed to pull off an impressive feat on March 7, 2021. But unfortunately, the celebration was short-lived as the vehicle soon exploded on the launch pad. Some flames were visible near the base of SN10 shortly after landing, and Musk later explained on Twitter that the spacecraft came in a little too fast for the landing. Due to low thrust likely caused by an issue in the fuel header tank, the hard landing crushed the legs of the landing system and part of the engine skirt, causing damage that led to the explosion a few minutes later. And just like every time, we hoped SpaceX would learn from its mistakes. Turns out it didn't. The SN11 met the same fate as its predecessor. The Starship lifted off into thick fog on March 30th, 2021. Just like SN10, it reached an altitude of 6.2 miles before returning to Earth for a landing attempt. However, its onboard cameras cut out 6 minutes into the flight, and the rocket exploded above the landing pad before making it back to Earth. John Insprucker acknowledged the explosive ending during the broadcast of number 11, mentioning that it had another exciting test and would not be returning, so viewers should not wait for the landing. Elon Musk later wrote on Twitter that Engine 2 of the 3 Raptor engines on Starship SN11 experienced problems during ascent, and they only got worse when it reignited for the landing burn. He added that something significant happened shortly after the landing burn started, but they would have to examine the bits later that day to determine what they were. SpaceX has been hard at work on its Starship prototypes and the Super Heavy booster with the ultimate goal of achieving a potential orbital flight. In August 2021, the company achieved a major milestone by stacking the Starship SN20 atop the Super Heavy for the first time, creating the world's tallest rocket. And on April 20th, 2023, Starship embarked on its first ever orbital launch attempt, marking an exciting moment for SpaceX and space enthusiasts all around the world. But wait, there's a catch. The journey was not without its challenges. Around 3 minutes after the launch, during stage separation, the Super Heavy's first stage failed to disconnect as planned and remained latched to Starship. This caused the vehicle to tumble and spin in the air, ultimately resulting in a rapid, unscheduled disassembly, or in other words, an explosion. As SpaceX continues to investigate the incident during Starship's first ever orbital launch attempt, they remain focused on pushing the boundaries of space exploration. Despite the setback, Kate Tice of SpaceX mentioned during the webcast that it's amazing how far they have come, and that everything after clearing the tower was just icing on the cake. It's clear that SpaceX has made a lot of progress in their development of Starship and the Super Heavy booster, but you can't just ignore the fact that the company almost went broke in the beginning. According to Musk, at the beginning they had no clue how to make rockets, and that he became the chief designer by default because nobody wanted to work for them. Things went downhill when their first 3 launches failed, and they almost ran out of money. Luckily, the 4th launch saved their butts, and it's the reason why we know SpaceX today. And there you have it, all SpaceX missions that failed.